Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2005 movie titled Transporter 2. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to former Special Forces Frank Martin sitting in his car. This time, Frank Martin appears considerably calmer and ready to tackle his usually difficult job. In the midst of this predicament, a sexy-looking woman approaches Frank and requests his assistance in changing her car tire. However, because Frank values timeliness and does not want to be late for work, he firmly declines the woman's plea. The woman unexpectedly pulls out a gun and forces Frank to get out of his car. Shortly later, 4 criminals approach and rush into Frank's car, attempting to take possession. However, the car's security system prevents them from starting it without a special code, which Frank, naturally, refuses to supply. When the goons attempt to use violence against Frank, things soon turn around. Frank demonstrates his toughness and expertise in handling perilous situations by beating up the 4 thugs instead of injuring him. Not long after, at precisely 3 p.m., Frank arrives at the assigned place, only to discover that his duty this time is to pick up a boy who has just returned from school. The boy, Jack, completely understands the regulations that Frank establishes when driving his car. Despite its simplicity, Jack eagerly anticipates this pickup moment because he relishes Frank's chauffeuring. Furthermore, Frank frequently plays guessing games with him on the drive, making their time together more fun and full of laughter. When Jack arrives home, it becomes clear that he is not an average child. Jack's father, a prominent official, consistently has guards and escorts. However, it appears that Jack's father, Jeff, and his mother, Audrey, frequently argue. Audrey thanks Frank once Jack gets out of the car, since Frank seemed to have taken on the role of a father figure in her husband's absence. Furthermore, Frank's isolated demeanor is highly appealing to her. As a result, she requests Frank's assistance again in transporting Jack to the dentist, to which Frank agrees. However, someone has been listening in on their talk without their knowledge. The scene switches to the villain's lair, where anxiety builds. At that point, a man named Johnny and his minions, including a stunning and attractive woman, look to be plotting something very terrible. They then demonstrate a deadly virus capable of wreaking havoc, along with its crucial antidote, which could be the only hope for many people's survival. As night sets, Audrey arrives at Frank's residence, drunk, and brazenly asks for a kiss. Frank, who holds Audrey in high regard, respectfully declines her request. The following day, Lola, a sexy mafia member, and 2 of her co-workers invade the hospital with nefarious purpose. Frank, who also transports Jack to the hospital for a dental appointment, is ignorant of the impending peril. Without hesitation, Lola shoots and murders the on-duty nurse and doctor, demonstrating the ferocity of their deeds. Shortly after, Frank brings Jack to the doctor's office and suspects something is wrong because the doctor and nurse who often evaluate Jack are reported apparently ill. These counterfeit nurses and doctors don't even act like healthcare professionals. A tattoo is also visible on Lola's leg, and Frank's focus is briefly interrupted when his friend, Inspector Turconi, arrives from a trip and is on his way home. Frank is even more surprised when he notices blood coming from behind the door, and Jack is nearly injected with the lethal virus. Fortunately, Frank swiftly instructs Jack to flee while he confronts these 3 criminals. They eventually escape from the incredibly dangerous scenario, but first, a bomb is hidden under Frank's car. Frank's car receives another round of gunfire after he leaves the hospital. Fortunately, the car Frank is driving now has bulletproof armor, allowing it to withstand the gunfire. Simultaneously, Lola, in her attempt to escape, manages to kill 2 police officers who were assigned to apprehend her. On the other side, Audrey and her husband have planned a surprise party to celebrate their son's birthday at their home. When the mafia leader arrives at the house gate, he immediately calls Frank to inform him that he has planted a high-explosive bomb on his car. The planted explosive will destroy the car despite the bulletproof armor. To secure his survival and that of Jack, Frank must obey all of the mafia boss's directions. Meanwhile, Lola reappears and enters Frank's car. Without saying much, Frank instantly hits the gas and races away, attempting to avoid the approaching cops. The crisis escalates as they race through the streets, forcing Frank to use his driving skills to dodge obstacles and keep a safe distance from the law enforcement personnel who are aggressively pursuing them. Back at Audrey's house, she gets into another furious disagreement with her husband, which seems to worsen the situation at home. Simultaneously, the chief of police arrives on the scene, revealing Frank's true identity as a former Special Forces man who has served in perilous locations such as Lebanon, Syria, and Sudan. However, the threatening mafia boss accosts Frank and Jack, heightening the tension. The mafia boss quickly calls Jeff and demands a massive ransom of $100 million. The mafia boss also delivers a terrifying ultimatum. If the ransom is not paid within 2 hours, they will begin sending bits of Jack's body to demonstrate the gravity of their threat. In this tense scenario, the mafia boss allows Frank to depart. However, as Frank gets ready to get into his car, the reflection in the water puddle around it alerts him to the bomb on the car, escalating the tension and risking his life. Shortly after, Frank works hard to convince Jeff that he is not the perpetrator of the acts they have witnessed. Instead of understanding the issue, Jeff becomes enraged and refuses to believe Frank's explanation, heightening the tension between them. In an effort to fix the problem and seek assistance, Frank contacts Turconi, who is at home baking a cake, unconscious of what is going on outside. The situation changes dramatically as the police arrive unexpectedly and ambush Turconi, transforming the previously quiet atmosphere into turmoil. Frank doesn't stop there. He calls Audrey in the hopes of convincing her of his innocence. Frank also makes it clear that he will do everything it takes to release Jack and return him safely. Frank then returns to the hospital, determined to track down the criminals responsible for the commotion. He also goes immediately to the hospital's CCTV control room, hoping to unearth important clues in the tapes. After carefully reviewing the footage, Frank is able to identify numerous people engaged in the incident. However, his inquiry doesn't end there. During his investigation, Frank uncovers a deadly substance intended to be injected into Jack, which might be lethal if not stopped right away. Shortly thereafter, Frank demonstrated his combat abilities by defeating the agents who were attempting to capture him. After neutralizing the threat, Frank retrieves another medicine from a drawer, believing it will help save Jack and turn the situation around. Jeff, on the other hand, is busy preparing the ransom money needed by the kidnappers in order to release Jack. Police are currently holding Turconi due to a mistaken identity, but he tries to divert their attention from the dangerous situation by teaching them how to cook. Turconi then realizes they've detained the wrong person and feels compelled to do something productive during his confinement. Not long after, Frank calls Turconi for assistance, as he requires access to a computer in order to learn more about the identity of the individuals he is following. The investigation revealed that the perpetrator is a Russian researcher who had previously produced biological weapons in a Siberian facility. With this information, Frank immediately determines the criminal's hideout and heads there right away. Upon meeting the goon, he sends shots to Frank and escaped the apartment before Frank got to him. The goon attempted to escape by boarding a bus, but Frank pursued him on a jet ski, accompanied by a woman. Fortunately, Frank caught the man and compelled him to reveal Jack's location. When the man refused to speak, Frank finally injected a fake drug into his thigh, prompting the criminal to instantly bind up his leg and flee for the antidote. At that moment, Frank casually followed him. Meanwhile, Audrey, concerned about her son's fate, had another disagreement with her husband. Just then, the cops claimed to have discovered her son. They had planned to unlock the door with a robot, but it abruptly stopped operating. As a result, Audrey got increasingly agitated and frantic, and she could no longer wait. She then took matters into her own hands, sprinting to open the door manually. Audrey is glad to discover that Jack appears to be fine, with no traces of explosives surrounding him. However, the comfort is short-lived because the mafia boss who kidnapped Jack had injected a hazardous virus into him. This illness is very contagious and can have significant consequences for those around him, increasing fear and menace for everyone nearby. Frank, on the other hand, eventually reached the goons' headquarters and found several people infected with the virus. Meanwhile, the Russian biologist Frank had injected was seen pleading with a doctor for the antidote, as the refrigerator contained only 2 antidotes. Aside from that, the infection might spread through the air to anyone close. However, Frank emerged unexpectedly and disclosed that the injection was actually water, stunning the biologist, who then attempted to shoot him. But Frank had considerably quicker reactions and defeated the crook. The doctor then revealed that Jack had contracted the virus, and his time was running out. The doctor then flung the antidote, and Frank jumped to catch it. Unfortunately, Frank's attempt to collect the antidote resulted in it smashing onto the floor. Simultaneously, Frank dashes and leaps to prevent the wheels of the truck from crushing the second antidote. Meanwhile, at home, Jack began to feel agony, and Audrey and Jeff began to experience similar sensations. Unfortunately, Jeff had to leave because he was slated to attend a major conference that would be broadcast to a large audience. After Jeff left, Frank sneaked in to administer the antidote to Jack. He then needed to track down the remaining mafia members in order to collect additional virus antidotes. As Frank prepared to leave, the police officers at Audrey's residence attempted to apprehend him. He was able to incapacitate the officers with ease. At the same moment, Jeff, who was already at the conference, began coughing, unintentionally spreading the dangerous illness to everyone around him. Frank then reaches Turconi again, asking for his assistance in locating the mob boss. At home, The mafia leader and a woman are watching news coverage of Jeff's conference. It turned out they intended to offer the antidote at an exorbitant price, hoping to make billions of dollars. Shortly later, Frank arrives alone, determined to put an end to the criminals' brutal activities and get the antidote for the virus's propagation. In this action-packed encounter, Frank once again proves his abilities in spectacular fashion, destroying all opponents in his path. This time, instead of his normal gun, Frank improvises and uses a fire hydrant hose as a weapon, demonstrating his ability to fight with varied equipment. Frank soon squares off against the mafia boss responsible for all of the chaos. However, Frank must exercise caution because the sole antidote available is currently within the mafia's body. The tension gets even more intense when Lola emerges, armed with 2 automatic guns and ready to fight. Frank, on the other hand, does not waste time and takes care of the matter immediately. Frank quickly takes down Lola, closing the gap between him and the much-needed antidote. Simultaneously, a helicopter takes off in the distance, revealing Johnny's attempt to escape from Frank. When Frank realizes the situation, he instantly jumps into a car and starts a chase after Johnny at full speed, determined not to allow his nemesis to get away so easily. The intense chase takes them to a runway, where Johnny intends to fly to Colombia in his own jet. Johnny is confident that he is safe, but things change dramatically when Frank approaches unexpectedly, catching him off guard. They immediately start fighting inside the plane. The anxiety peaks when a bullet strikes the pilot, forcing the jet to lose control. The aircraft begins to spiral out of control before crashing into the sea, causing catastrophic havoc. Despite the tremendous danger, Frank keeps focused and captures Johnny, putting an end to the criminal's escape attempt with his heroic deeds. Jack has now joined Audrey and Jeff as they recuperate in the hospital. Frank, who can only offer assistance from a distance, leaves a bouquet of flowers for them as a token of his affection. Frank then drives Turconi to the airport, guaranteeing his friend's safe return to France. With the job complete and everything back on track, Frank continues to accept new clients. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.